Institute for Agri-Food Technology. I kind of have oversight of operational activity across LIAT and the Risebone campus. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today, both online and also in person. Huge apologies for the little fire alarm incident this morning, so hopefully there will be no further fire alarms. So in terms of moving forwards, we've got two brilliant speakers today. We've got Simon Collinson, who's Director of Collinson and Associates Limited and Visiting Professor of Agri-Food Systems here at the Lincam Institute for Agri-Food Technology. And then we've got our Founding Director of LIAT, Prof. Simon Pearson, who's also our Head of Schools. So I will hand over to Martin, who's going to do the first talk. We will have an opportunity for questions, so please engage, and we will hopefully have a really fruitful discussion as well. Thanks, Martin.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, what I'm going to... Yeah, I think I just flipped across the wrong one, Tyler. What I'm going to do is really talk about what I see some growth potential to be within the farming and food supply chain, and really how technology fits into that. I've been working on the tech agenda for a long, long time. I think we're beginning to make some real sort of gains and some progress. But the real change that I think we're going to see is around the types of tech that we use. It's all about data. It is all about digital, in my view, now. But I wanted to start by just sort of setting the scene. A few sort of quick slides about the food chain. This is the value that we create. What GVA means is it's the difference between what you sell and the inputs that you buy. So it's that, and if you like, is the profit margin before you pay for your labour, your investment, your machinery and equipment, those sorts of inputs. What we can see is that the value in the food chain has continued to rise. But if you can see, the green bit at the bottom is agriculture. So if you look at the whole food chain, farming is only about 8 or 9% of the value that we create within the food supply chain. And for that reason, I come from a farming background, and that's what all of the rest of the family still do. But I stopped talking about farming as a separate business as far as government was concerned about 20 years ago. I now talk about the food chain. Because when you look at what's really driving change, it is about the food chain. If you look at the different parts of that, the green bar is farming, then you've got food processing, then you've got transport and logistics and marketing, then you've got retail and food service. What you can also see quite clearly there is how much of a hit there was at the consumer end of the chain in 2020. Why? What happened in 2020? COVID. Yeah, it seems a long time ago, doesn't it? But 5 years ago, we were still really in that whole first wave, that first year of COVID. You can see that some bits of the food chain took a real hit. Actually, farming didn't take much of a hit. Food processing didn't take much of a hit. It was more about the consumer end of the chain. What we've seen, though, is that that has all grown back very, very strongly. And so the food service sector is now larger than retail. So pubs, hotels, catering, in terms of the value that it creates, is now above the value of retail. And that's part of the long-term trend. So we're seeing a change in the way that consumers spend their money. If we look at the scale of the sector global, because I also tend to sort of go out to that whole global issue. Actually, when you look at global agriculture, it's 125 times larger than agriculture in the UK. And at the moment, on a global basis, we still have a lot of farmers. Very many more than, of course, we have within the UK. But just the sheer volume and the value output, I think, is something that shocks lots of people. And one way to describe that, if you look at Wembley Stadium and you fill it to the roof with wheat, it holds about 900,000 tonnes. We would fill that with the amount of food production globally every 49 minutes. So this is a big sector, not just in the UK, but on a global basis, it is absolutely enormous. Of course, what that is many, many businesses, many people, many supply chains, all of those have data, all of them need to be very, very efficient. I also wanted to put some context here around UK from a policy point of view, because what the government has begun to do about 2 years ago was to look at food supply and the security of that supply with a report each year now. And I went through the report that came out last year. We haven't quite got the report for this year yet. And I went through the first bit of it, which is what chapter 1 is about. It's about global food supply. So both supply from the UK and from other parts of the world to feed the UK. And I just did a quick word search on how many times different words were flagged up within that. And what I think is quite revealing is a lot of things that farming is talking about soils, about regen, about carbon, not very many mentions. There's a group in the middle, which there was some mentions of, i.e. how secure that supply was, trade, water, healthy, but the one that came out bigger than anything else was price. Now, I think what that says is quite a lot about how consumers are thinking, and really how the government thinks about food. A lot of it has to be about price at the moment. And it's very hard to get away from that, but that is a reality. We also, I think, have to take account of things like climate. We have seen extreme events, and we're getting more and more of them. And if you look at, and it doesn't really care whether you look at UK or global, the reality is the number of extreme events that we're seeing has been going up. The map on the left-hand side there is the map from 2022 to show drought across the EU. What I think is fascinating about that map is, of course, we thought we'd got drought in the UK, but it wasn't just us. The whole of the EU also had drought in that same year. East to west, north to south, there was drought effects. If we look at when we've had heat, then of course what we've seen is year after year of extreme heat, either in the UK or on a global basis. So those trends are there. I think that climate change is one of those things that is not really going to go away, so we have to learn to try and deal with it. And a particular aspect of that I do a lot of work on is water. And the picture on the right side of the screen there is the largest pumping station in the UK and within our continent, within Europe. About 4 miles from where I'm based, in the Fens. And some of you will probably be aware we're building a big new reservoir in South Lancashire and also one in Cambridgeshire. Each of those are about 55 million cubic metres. It's a lot of water. About 55 million tonnes. When we had that big flood event in winter 23-24, in 3 months, that pumping station 4 miles from us at home pumped 80 million cubic metres of fresh water out to sea. So we don't capture and store. When it rains, we pump it out to sea, and then when it's dry, we moan that we haven't got it. So actually, there's a piece here about the way that we need to join that up. But to do it, we need real-time management of water. Our systems at the moment don't manage water in real time. We pump it out when we've got too much, and we then complain that we don't have enough. On the whole of that system, we need much more data, in my view, to try and control that system. This might surprise you if you haven't read his book, but you would expect that this guy, that I'm sure you all recognise, and if not, you've read the name and you'll recognise from the name. He actually, in his book, about 3 or 4 years ago now, said that he praised the Dutch approach to agriculture, which was to intensify production, so you produce more output on less land. So you free up other land to do all the good things that we want to do around nature, around environment, around water, around climate change, around all of those sorts of issues. There's also been some recent work that has shown that the approach that we tend to take within the UK in the last few years on the policy side, which is to get all farmland to do both production and the environment, is probably not the best approach. What it actually means is that we export a lot of our footprint to other parts of the world, and our footprint in terms of water, in terms of energy, in terms of biodiversity, goes up as a result. So the approach to that would suggest we need to do some more intensive forms of agriculture in the places that are best suited to produce output. Just on the labour question, what we're seeing is a long-term trend. We've all talked about labour supply within the UK, but actually this is a global issue. So if you look globally, over the last roughly 20 years, the global population went up 26%, but the global farm workforce went down by 16%. Now, what it basically means is, whereas if you go back to the year 2000, each person in agriculture globally had to produce enough food for 6 people. Figures now close to 9 people. Somewhere like the UK, typical farmer produces enough food for 85 people. But there's a very clear trend here on a global basis. Fewer people working in farming, but more people to feed. So it means every person has to produce a lot more. Only way you can do that is technology. Every worker in agriculture globally, not just the UK, has to produce more. I think this is where AI, where data, where all of the new types of tech really come in. Very, very strong need for it. So what do I think about really the future? Well, I think that there is real potential to grow this sector. And that is because the volume of food that is in demand is going up, the value of food is going up. Actually, value is going up faster than volume. Because consumers are paying more to eat out more for convenience, they're travelling more, they're trying new things, so the value is going up faster than volume. And again, that's global, that is not just something that we're seeing within the UK. What we also know is that everybody wants us to impact less, whilst we also produce more. But they also want it at low cost. Go back to that point about really that food security debate within the UK. A lot of it now is about price, it's about cost of food. So we've got to actually produce more, reduce our impact, and we've got to do it cheaply. That's quite challenging, isn't it? To me, there's only one way that we can do that. It is all about efficiency, it's about productivity. What that absolutely requires is agri-tech, informed by data and digital. And that's not just about the production side of agriculture, it's about the environment as well. My view is the real big change we will see really in relation to things like carbon, water, biodiversity, is we'll be asked to prove the impact that we have. It won't be just a question of being asked to do different things and being paid to do different things on our farms. It will be about proving that what we've done has had an impact. Again, you need data. You need digital types of systems to do that. So what about policy? Well, I think we're probably just at the point where there's an inflection point. So we've had policy that for the last 25, 30 years has been pushing more and more towards the environmental aspects, asking us to set land aside, to take up all the different schemes. And this wasn't, again, just a UK view. I think it's fascinating that some of you will be aware that the EU brought out an approach called farm to fork. The impact assessment for the farm to fork approach accepted that Europe would reduce its food output by 10 to 15%. And the assumption that the politicians had when they passed that a few years ago was we just import a bit more. That whole policy is now being turned on its head. It's been turned on its head because of COVID, war in Ukraine, concerned about food prices, concerned about climate change. They're now saying, no, we do need to get back to producing a bit more food. So how do we do that? Well, the reality is we have to do it by being efficient. It is all about efficiency. Yes, we need to do the environment, but we need to be efficient and we need to compete in terms of the way that we produce food as well. In the UK, one of the groups that I'm involved in has really tried to push this agenda. What they've basically said is we should be aiming for 30% more food with half of the impact on the environment by 2050. And they've said there's 4 big themes that we need to work on that. The farm policy agenda needs to support it. We need to make sure that regulation works. We need research, but it shouldn't just be research. It should be innovation. It should be commercialisation. It's about now getting that technology out of the lab, out onto farm. It isn't just about doing the research. It's about commercialising it and using it. And the fourth theme that they flagged up was, again, that data point. That you can only really understand what you're doing if you have the data to drive that process. So lots of those aspects, and of course what the team here are really focused on is the last two of those. How do we commercialise that research, and how do we use data? On the back of that, Tesco's actually came out and said, yes, we agree with that. We need more data on the supply chain. I was with a very large corporate business in the sector on Monday this week. The whole debate with them was about exactly the same. They were actually on the farming end of the supply chain. Their view is that globally there's a real challenge, that they're generating lots of data, but their view was even their best farmers and their own internal people are only using somewhere between 10 to 30% of the capability of the data that they now collect. So every time a tractor drives up the field, combine goes up the field, goes up the field, a drone flies over, we collect vast amounts of data. But their view is we're not even close yet to using all of the detail that is within that data. So this is the next real big challenge in my view. How do we use that data to drive change that works for farmers, but works for the environment and works for the economy? The US has gone even further. So we said we're going to increase our output by 30% and impact 50% less by 2050. The US says, no, we can do 40% by 2050. And we can all have our own views about politics in the States and the good points and the bad points about where they're driving things. The States absolutely gets this though. And it's survived a change in the regime in the States. So both the Democrats and Trump and the Republican Party have both signed up to this agenda. So the States is pushing this, pushing it quite hard. How do they increase output on farm and the value in the food chain whilst impacting less and actually doing that quite quickly? 40% increase by 2050, that's quite a big target, isn't it? But that's what they've signed up to. And so the whole of their approach, the investment approach, the research approach, is now geared around trying to deliver that. So really, sort of my final point is that how can we do that? Well, from my point of view, I don't think any individual business can do this on your own farm, on your own, without anybody else. You need to work with other people. What you actually have to do, you have to share things, you have to share data. And you have to actually have technology that works. When I was young, and I'm older than quite a lot of people in this room, there was a guy who wrote a book which was, when I was in sixth form, it was what everybody was talking about. And I like his quote, we're stuck with technology when what we really want is things that work. So it's not about doing the research, it's about commercialising it. It's about getting it in front of farmers, on farm, trialling on farm, proving that it works. That's what we need. And the bottom quote was something that a Dutch greenhouse firm said to me 33 years ago. They were already, 33 years ago, sharing all their technical data and all their financial data amongst 250 farmers. And I was sort of a bit taken aback by that, how open they were within their group 33 years ago. That was his quote there. We don't compete with each other, we compete with the rest of the world. Go back to that point that the UK is less than 1% of global farming. Actually, the real challenge for British farming, I would suggest, isn't can you get one over on the farmer just down the road. It's can British farming compete with America, with Brazil, with the... Yeah? It's that global view. To do that, we all work together, and not just farmers coming together, but we work as part of a supply chain. I think we can really make some progress. But to do that, we've got to be open to the idea that we share data, we use that data to drive improvement along the whole supply chain. Final point, just go back to that point that actually agriculture is only about 8 or 9% of the value within the supply chain. If we want to create businesses that thrive for the long term, it's about having a whole supply chain that thrives. And it's about a fair share of the returns along that supply chain. To do that, we have to be prepared to share data both across the sector, so amongst groups of farms, and up and down the supply chain. Now, lots of people say, of course, that is a real challenge with businesses like the supermarkets. I think what is fascinating is the way that some of the supermarkets are changing. In the last month, we've seen an announcement in the top fruit, so tree fruit part of the supply chain in the UK, of a 25-year deal worth £750 million with a supermarket agreeing with a major supplier in Kent a long-term deal supply contract. Why? Because they're concerned about security of supply. So actually, when those things start to happen, this is the game that I think we need to play. We need to come together, collaborate, work together, drive it forward, have things that work, and use data. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. That's really insightful. I think we'll move straight ahead to Simon, and then we'll have questions afterwards.
Okay, so thanks, Martin. I thought that was fantastic, and it set the scene really well for some things I'm going to talk about. Really, so I think we set the scene of the challenges, and now we're going to try and talk around some of the opportunities to solve those, not solve them, but actually deal with some of those challenges. I think some of those challenges are really big. And the first, I think Martin's really laid out the sort of social and political environment agenda really well in that talk. So farming's chasing all sorts of problems, and we use this slide quite a bit. So seasonal migrant workers is the famous one, which we've focused on here for many years, and we're making real progress. Healthy diets and sustainable diets is another one. Climate change, which Martin mentioned, is another one. So these are really big mega problems, and they set the grounding. But I think as Martin said, the policy is really an inflection now. And I think if we'd all gone back, and it's easy to remember, 5 years ago, the whole debate around sustainability and carbon and all that sort of stuff. And I just think it's really changed almost over the last year, I think. And really now the big question is, you can't have all that and sustainable food unless farms are profitable. And then the challenge then is how you're going to create that profit if the degree of support from the government is reducing. And I think no matter what happens, everyone can see the political environment and that level of support, whether it is directly reduced or eroded by inflation, is going. And so my view on that now is the key focus really has to be on making those farms profitable. And I think the Net Batters is producing a report, the Farm Profit Report, I think pre-Christmas, which I understand has got 50 recommendations in, which are more sort of structural things. So we'll all look forward to that. And it's been really interesting to me how silent DEFRA have been over the last year. Quite surprising, isn't it? I know there's been a reshuffle, but maybe there's a lot of hope on the next report. Let's see. But farms have got to be profitable, and that does will keep the pressure on technology. And as Martin said, I think the great opportunity is these data-driven technologies. So it's AI, and it's still robotics, and so I see lots and lots of opportunity in that space. So how do we go about it? And I think most people here know about LEAP, but I just wanted to just keep re-emphasising the way that we operate, because it is truly different from anything that's anything I'm aware of, certainly in the UK and probably internationally. I'm not aware of anything quite like this model. And actually the model's now sort of maturing in time, time. So I think when we started it, we realised that we had a thing. I think now as the policy environment's changing, we're now really seeing that model is a very effective model. And as Martin said, there's a huge focus now on research commercialisation and research translation. It's pretty fair to say, in my opinion, there has been quite a significant research translation failure over the last 20, 30 years, where we've had a huge amount of basic research going in. UKRI budget's 8 to 9 billion. Agricultural research funding in the UK has been running about 400 million for the last 10 years or so. And Treasury rightly is saying, well, I've put 400 million in, where is the commercialisation? Where is the return on investment from all this research? And I think there's been a complete commercialisation translation failure. So what we're trying to do here is really address that failure. I think our model fits really well, and the model's really very simple. And we set up LIAT in 2016 really as an interdisciplinary platform, having farming roots in Lincolnshire, and worked for Marks & Spencer and ran a farming company. So I've done the buying side for Marks & Spencer and the growing and selling side in Lincolnshire. And I can assure you all, it's better to be a buyer than a seller. Yeah. And it's particularly hard to be a seller when you've got to grow the stuff and you get everything right and it's all going well, and then a plague of locust or something set on your crops. It's just horrendous. It's a really tough job. Now, we set up LIAT really from an understanding of the complexity of what farmers have to face on a daily basis. And if you think about the way science has been organised over the last 20 years, since the AFRC was disbanded in 92, 93, we used to have a research council called the Agricultural Food Research Council, which did everything on agriculture and food. Then it was disbanded. I think it was around, I've got a feeling it was foot and mouth or something, and Tony Blair reacting against foot and mouth, which he did.
It was also part of the move away from ADAS.
Yeah.
So ADAS was removed about the same time, but it was dying days of the Margaret Thatcher Conservative major time was when it began to change.
Yeah. So quite frankly, if you look at the mistakes of policy, that was a big one. I think it's unrecognised. But what happened then was lots of agricultural science was then put under the biological sciences remit, which is great. They're really good people, well-meaning, but of course they focus on biological science. If you think of what farmers do, they think about biological science. They think about crops, they think about animals, they think about plant breeding, but you think about engineering. There's lots of debate. I think Martin and I were at the APPG, George Freeman's, when he announced 30-50-50, 2 weeks Effie was there as well. And there's a big play on the impact of plant breeding on productivity, and a chap from Germany stood up and said the whole of agricultural innovations around plant breeding. Well, okay, it probably is, but I suspect if you'd asked John Deere or Casey Molland whether they were key drivers of productivity, or you asked Yarra or you asked Syngenta pesticides, I suspect they would all say that they had a significant thing. But we had a bioscience sort of centric view of the world at that meeting. But the reality is, if you are a farmer, you are thinking about biosciences, you're thinking about engineering, you're thinking about data, you're thinking about people, you're thinking about the environment, you are thinking about long-term sustainability, and you are thinking about profit. And to actually think about all those things, you've therefore got to, if you want an institute that can react to that challenge, you've got to be able to pull all that stuff in. And so that's how we set LIAT up, really, was an interdisciplinary centre to pull in all that stuff. So we put agri-tech at the centre, the top half of that just shows the sort of science disciplines that we've been pulling in. There's 5 there. I put engineering, computer science, business, life sciences, chemistry. We now, and Ceres AgTech, our friends at Cambridge, have done an analysis over the last few weeks. We now operate projects with 50 different science disciplines in them, ranging from nuclear physics, chemistry, environmental sciences, economics, you name it. 50 science disciplines which we are deploying in agri-tech, just at Lincam, Cambridge. And I suspect if we went round UKRI, there'd be more. But that I think proves the point. And if we're stuck with a standard institute which followed the old rules, we'd have been doing bioscience stuff and probably not getting very far. So it's about pulling in those interdisciplinary links, and then it's about being challenge-led, and that challenge-led means great networks. So it's about talking to people who are on the front line of these things and understanding what those challenges really are. So the bottom half just shows the sort of people that we have in conversations. We talk to lots of universities. We've now got projects now, I'm looking for 23 different universities or something, done projects with at centre at LEA. It's about finding those skills. We are very, very active with civic society. FE, we see, where's FE? Every 2 days. Martin once a week. And that's really about sort of recognising you can't do agri-tech on your own. You've got to work with the community. And that's civic society, and that means members of the public, but it also means working with the district councils, the GLMCCA, the county councils, and everybody, because we've all got a piece to play in trying to work together as a team to solve some of these problems. Then we work with policy. I've done quite a lot with DEFRA, and Martin does an awful lot with DEFRA, and DCIT, DBT, and all those good people, SCDO a bit more as well. Then you have to work with the agri community, we work with the food community, and then more and more we work with the digital community. Digital community, I think of those really startups, innovators, and that's why we work very closely with James Page and the Eagle Lab, which has been a fantastic initiative that's gone on here. So through that network, what you then really understand the challenges, and that makes the app very challenge-led, which is very, very different from anywhere else. And so the challenges we faced were the challenges of agriculture, so lack of availability of workers, lack of profitability, blah blah blah. So that gives you the questions that you've got to answer. And just to show how significant it is, the list on the left are 7 of the 8 research councils from UKRI. We had the whole of the UKRI board here in the summer, trying to understand how we're doing this thing. So I think we're absolutely noticed nationally of having a model which is very different. So we've got funding from 7. We've got STFC is basically physics. So we've got funding from them. EPSRC, which is engineering and data, a lot from them. Innovate UK, which most people know, we have about £140 million. The collaborative research. Research England's our big friend, NERC, which is environment, BBSRC and ESRC. There's only one that's missing, which is the AHRC, which is Arts Humanities Research Council. So if anybody's got any good ideas, not quite got full set. So, to prove that point. So and that's what LEAC does, and that's what we've always done since we've been founding. That model will not change. And so this is just a short clip that we've done just to show some of the stuff. And most of you have seen this before, I think, but I'll just go through it again. And this just shows the stuff we've done. Our big grant was our LAR grant, where we've done lots of robotic phenotyping with a brilliant PhD, who's identified some new traits on wheat, which can increase yield in wheat, which would be amazing. The impact of that, if you can just do it every 2-3. Right. Everyone knows our work on strawberries. This is a big one. This is Saga Robotics. They've now raised $40 million worldwide. They do 30% all UK fruits now. It's a UV treatment to reduce fungicide use, stops powdering, well, reduces powdering, it doesn't stop it. The innovation really underpinning it is the autonomy stand, and that came from here. This is our latest business. We're launching a new one probably in January, which will be Jabas, and that's a fruit logistics support company where robots go out, find a picker, and retrieve fruit. The technology in that is unbelievably complex. It looks like a little robot going around. But if you think of it, you've got to do the navigation, it's got to navigate in a GPS environment, GPS denied environment, it's got to navigate safely, it's got to find people, and it's got to make sure it doesn't run people over and it's safe. The technology in that is, there's £3.5 million of underpinning research just in that one company to get that technology right. And that will be launched by Mark Hanhyde, who's Professor of Computer Science, as I say, in January. We've got lots of customers lined up already wanting it, so it looks like a good one. So here you go, and that's on the right, that's what the robots is. It's a robot world. This is the robot moving through, and that's a real world. Then we've got Fruitcast AI, which is one of our spin-outs. Raymond Kerr. One of the things we're trying to do here is create as many spin-outs as we possibly can. And that's a lot around civic society, trying to get jobs and skills in. And this uses AI. It can image every single strawberry in a crop, about 3.5 million a day. It's now doing 15% of all UK fruit. And 1 in 6 fruit that you've eaten, strawberries, this summer's probably been imaged by those cameras. Strawberry. And then this is the other one, Garricus. I'll show you another little picture of this. So this is our first proper full robotic company, and the Garricus. We founded that in 2019, and it's taken 6 years to get to a commercial robot. Very, very complex, difficult piece of technology. You've got to do the software, you've got to do the hardware. And I was at G's yesterday doing the first install of almost the final fix robot. So we're very, very close. We're about 6 to 9 months away. We have a competitor company in Canada, 4OG. They've just done a fundraise, and their market cap's worth about $150 million. So we're that close. And so, and then this is some of the other stuff we've been doing. This is sort of stuff from the students. I love this. I always show this one. I just love this thing. So is this the future of farming? Personally, I'd say I don't think so. It looks pretty amazing. I just love the way that the sheep look at that thing and go, bloody hell, what is that? I think if those sheep had watched the Terminator movie, they'd be terrified. But look at them, thinking, oh my God. Anyway, sheep shouldn't worry too much because the battery life of that is about 40 minutes. Battery life of a sheepdog's probably about a day. So I don't think sheepdog need to worry too much. And here you go. And then we did some flocking. I just think it's really cool. So that was just some students who just went off and did that. I mean, it's brilliant. This is the flocking behaviour. You see the AI used up there to identify the sheep and then measure the flocking behaviour. You see the robot at the bottom, and Matt Bagley is down at the bottom. It's one of those two people going, God, here's my sheep. So, but isn't it interesting when you can do those things? And that was a spontaneous thing from 2 or 3 of the PhD students. We just went up and did it. And that's the genuine purity of innovation. People going out there and doing something that's really amazing. And we have a lot of that going on. And then this last one is where I was yesterday. So I was at G's installing, well, I didn't install it. I put one of their nets on and told the team they're doing a great job, and they all smiled and I left. It's called leadership and morale rating. I just knew I had to leave quickly because it was there. Anyway, and it's fantastic. It's the world's first dual-arm mushroom picking robot, and that's come from our Ceres program in Cambridge, and that's literally at G's. So it's absolutely the world's first because it's the only one with dual arms, so it's twice the speed of anything that you can get anywhere else. This is with the motors turned down, and You see it recognises the strawberries, does a tilt, then it twists, pulls them out. It's very simple, not much pressure at all actually, and pulls them out. And then there's two bits in there we've not installed yet, which is a auto trimming piece and then a check layer. So when you so it will put the mushrooms into a punnet to a known weight, and that takes out all the secondary packhouse operations. So there you go. So that's we're raising for that about 600k for that business, and that will get us through to first orders in about 9 months' time. I'm really proud of this one because it's probably the most complex piece of engineering we've ever done. Because you've got to do the software. There's lots of AI involved. There's lots of hardware involved. You've got to bring the two things together. You've got to do it in a working environment. It's a really hard job. So I'm really proud of that one. So we'll see how that goes. And as I say, the competitor's worth about $150 million. The global TAM, total addressable market for mushroom picking, is about $2.6 billion. Now, the wheat crop in the United Kingdom is worth $2 billion. So just mushroom, think of it on a global scale. As Martin said, on a global scale, these are massive opportunities. So the market opportunity for that alone is equivalent to the entire British wheat crop. Just to give you an idea of when you go to global scales, of why these technologies are significant. So how do we do it? We do it really for our Ceres program. It's our friends in Cambridge, and it doesn't happen by coincidence. You have to have a process to do this innovation. And we use the Ceres process. It's the process which Cambridge developed for medical therapeutics. And that process is simple. You work with industry, find big ideas, big challenges. You work with academics to try and deliver solutions to those challenges. And that means a lot of time spent trying to coach academics not to be academics, which is really hard. So what we do is coach them to produce business plans, not grant proposals. Jimmy Godfrey is the chair of that thing, so we've got some very significant people on the panel, and Richard Williamson, Jimmy Godfrey, Mark Southern. The business plans are presented to this panel, and it's just industry people signing it off. If the industry people say it's viable, we get the money and they go. But we also use the funding as milestone money, not grants. So if you get a BDSC grant, you get the money. If stuff goes pear-shaped in 6 months, BDSC do not come back and say, "Can I have my money back?" So from a commercial point of view, that is a fairly unsatisfactory way of managing money. And so here it's very different. So you have your milestones. If you don't have your milestones, grants turn off, and that's it. And but there's lots of support for people to try and help deliver those milestones. But it changes behaviour. What we want to try and do is have people very focused on delivering outcomes, which is a much more commercial approach. It helps drive the research, but it also increases the quality of research because it puts pressure on people to actually raise quality. So I think that's why it's been successful. Cambridge did that, same model, American Therapeutics. They rolled that out into an investment fund, made it a private company. That's raised $500 million and $450 million of US venture money. That's now a private company. So our next ambition is to do the same here. So we're now changing the Ceres process, trying to fundraise, create a longer term fund, £50 million, and create a patient capital venture fund underneath what we do to really drive the commercialisation piece. So that's Ceres. So just to give you an idea, these are some of the things. We've now got 50 projects going. And I'm not going to, you can't pick winners in this game, but these are the sorts of diversity stuff we're doing. We're doing stuff nitrate runoff, direct air capture of carbon, variable rate fertiliser, novel pesticide removal, seaweeds, biopackaging, bio-based batteries, upcycling, distillers grain waste. We're doing stuff on crop loss and waste, lettuce harvesting. We've got projects in Arizona on that, in-field pathogen detection, improving labour efficiency, using 5G, food quality, all extraordinary. Next generation healthy crops. So that's just some of them, but there's 50 of those projects ongoing. I think it's the largest cohort of projects outside FIP in agri-tech. And then the final point is what we really want to do here is our next step is keep going. And when you develop tech, you can develop it either around the sector base of agri-tech, fintech, medtech, so sectors, and we do agri-tech. And you can also, or develop it around the place. And so there's lots of debate around that. And I'd say one of the reasons why there's been issues with agriculture and innovation in the UK is what's happened over the last 10 years is a massive fragmentation of research focus and efforts across the entire United Kingdom. So there'll be a competition launched, and then people go, well, I need one of them in Northern Ireland, I need one of them in Scotland, I need one of them in Wales, I need one of them in Yorkshire, I need one of them in Lincolnshire. And then you end up with this massive fragmentation, and because then actually your asset base is relatively small relative to the market size, you become very fragmented. The market doesn't really know where to go to take on these next generation opportunities. And so what we're trying to do here is really change that and absolutely do two things at the same time in parallel, and that is focus on the sector, so that is a laser focus on agri-tech with private, public, commercial partners and accelerators such as the Eagle Lab. So laser focused on sector agri-tech. But where is the best place to put agri-tech if it's crop-based? Well, it has to be within the East Midlands and East Anglia, and because of the significance of Lincolnshire in terms of the industry, it has to be here, in my humble opinion. And so what we're trying to do here then is anchor that sector in our region, particularly around rhizome, and that is a very, very big focus. What we want to try and do here is then grow this rhizome itself as a campus to become an internationally significant centre for agri-tech, and then crowd in. And the concept then of clusters is important for civic society. And if you've got a large number of people working on a single site, that attracts people because they can then set up their lives, they can move in and out of businesses in that cluster, and they can contribute to society, contribute to schools, contribute to whatever. And so we're trying to build that cluster here, and I think that's the next part of our journey. So I think for us, Leah, we're kind of, I think if you think of an exponential curve, we're in the left-hand side flat bit going up. Once the cluster develops, we'll get into the exponential bit, and that's what we're going to try and do over the next 5 years. So, yeah, so that's it. So thank you very much. So, as I say, I'm not going to pick winners on technologies, there's just so many. Each individual one, you just have to select carefully and prosper it. So thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
One glaring omission I've noticed from both talks is the lack of focus on the average age of UK farmers being 59. So one of the key kind of logjams that I see is getting new, younger people involved in technology. How do you guys see that?
I completely agree, and I do think one of the best things we've been able to do is also portray agriculture as more as a technical based industry. So robotics, AI, all that sort of stuff. We know from CDTs that was very, very attractive to people to come in. So we made a small dent. I think one of the biggest challenges actually it's trying to make that bigger dent. So I think we can get high level skills people in. I think we've got to think a bit more about grassroots particularly the grassroots around us here in Lincolnshire. And I know we had a mayor here on Wednesday, I know one of their themes was how do you get local schools engaged, how do you create excitement around schools. I think we've got to think about that a bit harder. So whether those people get into owning farms, not many will, because farmers just get bigger and bigger and bigger. But the jobs in the agricultural supply chain are fantastic and very high paid and very rewarding in many ways. So we've got to keep that message across and got to pull people in.
I think it's just one or two things that I would add. I think it's a very real challenge. But I do think we're beginning to get some movement. And you can, again, love or loathe him, but the Clarkson effect, if you actually look at what it's done with the number of people who want to study farming, there's been about a 20% increase in the numbers going to study farming in the last 3 years. And what that's been put down to is the Clarkson effect. And I think what it is also about, is about changing the nature of jobs. And I think it is that tech-led approach that's really going to work. One of the things that I see across this sort of region, I also chair the Norfolk and Suffolk County Council's Agri-Food Group. We're seeing exactly the same there. Younger people are coming into the sector, but they're not going into every single business. What we have across the whole of this geography down the East Coast is we have some very large, progressive farming businesses. Those are the businesses that are attracting the young people, because they're the ones who are adopting the tech. But they're also not just going on to farm, they're going into that supply chain. They're working for machinery firms, they're working for the fertiliser, the spray firms, they're working for people within that supply chain. That's what's changing, and changing really quite quickly. One of the things that I've been talking about to a lot of people is what I call wish for better jobs. We want young people to come in, but have well-paid jobs, interesting jobs, sustainable jobs, i.e. they're there for long term, and they've got to be healthy. If we can do that, young people will want to do this. But we've got to recognise that young people don't think in the same way as people my age group think. They're not prepared to do some things that I did on a farm when I was young. I was in a meeting in Norfolk on Monday evening this week, the Institute of Agri, and we had the biggest range of ages there, from people under the age of 30 to people my age. And all of the young ones said, oh yeah, actually farming's fantastic, but I don't want to work 60 hours a week, every week. I actually want to have some time to myself. I want to use all the tech. I want to be sustainable. I want to do all those sorts of things. So the sector also needs to recognise, we're going to attract young people in, you've got to recognise what will attract them. Actually, there's lots of options. They've got tech skills, they can go off and work in lots of different sectors. So how do we make the food chain really attractive for them? It is something that the LEP team, or the OLDEP team, the Food Valley team are trying to do a lot of work on. Jess, do you want to add anything on that from a skills point of view?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Being from Lincolnshire myself, and being an ex-secondary teacher, I wouldn't necessarily have known all of the wonderful opportunities that we've got in the county. So I think what Simon and what Martin is saying is we need a bigger visibility piece, just to make people aware at quite a young age what's available. And then I'm sure people are going to want to do the jobs. You know, we've got lots of people on the St Giles estate there who could be earning a really good wage, but just don't know necessarily what we've got to offer. So I think it's about harnessing that.
And it's about being clear that we need to get the job nature and the technology and the career paths that actually people want. And that also goes back to the other point that Simon made about clusters. One of the reasons we want a real cluster around this sector is that actually people can develop a whole career. It's not about a single job, it's not about doing a single role. Actually, most people are going to change their role quite a lot of times through a career. It's about giving people a career path. You do that, that's what, in my view, will attract them.
Most people in tech change jobs every 2 years, unless they can go laterally, it won't work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's what we're beginning to see, but there's probably still further to go. I think the real challenge that does flag up is for smaller farming businesses, how do you create a career path? Because actually that's quite challenging. But actually maybe some collaboration, working together as a group, helps to do that. Some of the farming JVs that I've seen across the region actually do manage to attract younger staff, because actually you're not working just on a single farm. You're working for a group of farms. You're working with the latest kit. You are always at the forefront of what's coming next. And I think that really helps to drive change. There's a group in Norfolk called, which has got the Holcombe estate, it's got the Saul estate, it's got Raynham. So even those very large estates are now coming together to have a collaborative approach how to recruit the staff, the technology they use, the data sharing, because they recognise that to get young people in, get the tech in, they need to think in bigger terms, to give a real career path and that career path and ladder for the young people to move into.
Okay, any questions? Barbara?
Hi. Thank you. It's a very interesting platform and service. I was going to ask, because it seems it's very probably biased in the right direction. So you are giving support to ideas and people coming from academic settings or RTOs. Are you thinking of any mechanism to help individuals that can have a good idea of its development and commercialization? That aren't related to
yes. Really, I mean, bringing James here. I mean, what we learned from James and the Eagle Lab is the value of targeted interventions around particular challenges. And so you do a lot of female founders stuff.
Yeah, female founders, veteran founders, Lincolnshire Black business, we do a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I think what we're trying to do at Eagle Labs is like that space. So someone, if you're a single individual on your own, a founder with an idea, you can work out the Eagle Lab here. So you get office space, you get one desk in, you get to connect with a great team at Lincoln, and also all the other people that will get coming through. And then from Eagle Labs, we'll provide that individual with that support, so what it takes to be a founder, access to investors, business support, open up to the wider Eagle Labs network. So we've got 43 other sites across the UK, so interdisciplinary, so cyber security, climate tech, space tech, a lot of stuff which kind of links into what we're trying to do. So, and that's where Eagle Labs works really well as a landing platform for someone that's zero connection to academia at all, but can come in and work out with the Eagle Lab and get set up and get to meet the team. And we talk a lot about place, not space, and I think being part of this place and the connections we've got really helps open that up. From my background, 17 years in finance, only coming up to 18 months now in ag-tech, but the connections I've made in that short period of time just by being based out here full time, so founders get that benefit as well.
Yeah. And then we do a lot of direct interventions, particularly for academics. So if you're on the Ceres program, you get a lot of support in terms of taking an idea to commercialisation, because academics are not trained in that at all. That is not. You do a PhD, you do your tiny little contribution to science, which is really big to you, but in the great things it's relatively small. That's the training you've got. You are not trained in commercialisation or business or anything like that. You just aren't. And so we put an awful lot of focus and time in anybody on the programme to actually get them upskilled in that. And then we also do specific programmes. So we have a female founders thing, which Reshma is on, which is Rising Wise. And we're very lucky, University of Cambridge and University of Oxford have their own programme to help mentor female founders. And we've been able to get the Ceres team on that programme. So I think you're just starting, Reshma.
Yes, we just started, and just the first courses like we do every Saturdays. So it's very empowering to hear this from females who are funding academics and women entrepreneurial role, and just giving us that training. Just not missing opportunities for us. Academic, like Simon says, it's very difficult for us to understand that word, but here, real experience of what we have gone through. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
And give you the skills that you need.
Yeah. So
we're happy to support you. Doing more out.
yeah. There's lots to do though. You know, it's a challenging area to very challenging.
Sorry. Tyler, is there any online questions?
We've not got any questions online.
Okay, brilliant. So we're not drawing the online audience. Any more questions in the room?
Can I make one more comment? My brain's waking up now.
Yeah.
To link to what Martin, well, I think what everyone's been saying, I think it's a very ethical industry. I imagine maybe James feels that, where he's come from as well.
Yeah.
That the industry wants to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think that that will be a big attraction for the younger generation as well. That was it.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I actually do think that Clarkson's changed the perception of farming quite a lot, as Martin said. It's ethical and very, very challenging.
Yeah.
I'll just give one other example of that, where one part of the sector that's really making a lot of progress. So the village that I come from, just in the Fens, if you go back 40 years ago, it was the strawberry village of the country. There were more farms growing strawberries in that one village 40 years ago than there are now farms growing strawberries across the whole country. So the sector's changed, it's gone to larger businesses. But we've just done a review on the sustainability agenda for the whole of that sector. What's fascinating about it is the speed of progress that it's making with everything from the types of way that they control pest and disease, to carbon footprints, to water footprints, to recycling plastics. They're doing all of those things and they're doing them at speed. There's a ban going to come in on the use of peat within the commercial sector. It's just going through MPs and boards at the moment of the final sign-off. The soft fruit sector is already there. Because it recognised that that law was going to come, it's already changed what it's doing. There's only one of the 4 crops that's using any peat at all now. If you look at plastics, they're recycling plastic. Look at water. Over half of them have built a new reservoir within the last 3 years. If you look at pesticides, the amount that they're spending on biopesticides has gone up by 200% in the last 5 years. So they are already making that change. That's a good news story. We're probably not talking about it enough, but it's the sort of thing that would attract young people. It would attract people from outside the sector, come into a sector that's been so progressive and is moving forward. But we need to shout about it, we need to talk about all the good things that farming's doing if we're going to get that next generation.
I was going to mention the profitability factor. Most farms aren't profitable. And what underpins all of the adoption of this technology that you're offering up is based on the profitability of the farm. So it seems to me that is the biggest challenge right now. You mentioned orders. We're going to expect to see orders coming. But who's helping the farmers actually be profitable enough to adopt the technology? Most farmers, I'm from Derbyshire. A lot of farms are profitable in Derbyshire lately because they're selling their land to developers. So it's a dwindling effect. The way I see it, it's affected by policy. Who's within the supply chain that has the power to tell them at the top, policy's got to change it and then trickle back down. Yeah. Or else it's a one-end street, down the street.
Yeah, probably you're absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, where we develop most of the, again, I think it's very different. Our approach is when we look at any project we fund with 150, we always have to justify it on an ROI, 2 ROIs, an ROI for the developers of the technology, and above all an ROI for the farmers. So we absolutely know nothing is going to be adopted if it's cost and not value in the supply chain. So this one's a great, the robotic one is a great one because 93 pence for every kilo of mushrooms is labour cost. So that's a big amount of money. So you can take out a big amount of money and then the robot company can share in that and the farmer can share in that. And so what we try to do is spot only projects where there's a dual ROI, and that's why we have investment committees. We look at these things and say, well, we'll only invest if there's two, because it won't work if the robot company doesn't make money or farmers doesn't make money. No one's going to adopt it. So there is lots of opportunity out there, but you have to work hard to get them. And unfortunately, in some sectors, arable agriculture actually is quite a hard one. It's hard to find those double ROIs. So it's difficult.
Hard, but not impossible.
Yeah.
So I think, to me, this is what drives the whole agenda as far as I'm concerned. Coming from a farming background, the family business is very, very commercial, supplies supermarkets, mainly greenhouse crops, never had any support, simply has to produce a return. If you don't produce a return, you can't invest, you can't grow. So you have to be absolutely focused on cost. That's why I'm so focused on data. That's why I'm so focused on really efficiency and productivity. Those are the only tools that we really have to drive change. I think what we're probably different in Lincam from some of the other research places that Simon's talking about is they do things that almost government tells them to do or government wants them to do, and it's driven a bit of as a wish list from a policy point of view as to what we want to achieve. What we try and do here is focus very much on the commercial return for the farmer and the supply chain. Because if they won't buy it, you can't do it, ultimately. The farmers have to buy the tech, and to buy the tech, they've got to prove that there's a return on that tech. So what I'm really focused on is really that efficiency type of question. Can you grow a crop of wheat with less fertiliser next year than you used last year? Can you get your cost base down? Can you do that around water? Can you do it around your labour supply, your mechanisation costs? Can you get those costs down? Also, can you increase your output? So I think wheat is a fascinating one. The average yield in the UK hasn't gone up in 40 years, virtually. It's hardly moved. And the average yield in the last 2 or 3 years, in fact the last 4 years, has been lower than it was in the previous 10 years. Now some of that is extreme weather events, but it's also the fact that we've made progress. At the top end, we've got people achieving almost double what the average is now for the whole of the country. How are they doing it? It's precision, it's attention to detail. It's actually changing the way that they grow the crop. Not all soil types can achieve probably as much as that, but the range that we see, from the best to the worst, is getting bigger. And so what ag tech, in my view, has to be about, it has to be about trying to understand why some farms perform better, how do you achieve that, but it's not always 100% about getting the highest output you can. It's the most profit that you can achieve that is the key driver. When I began my ag degree in autumn '84. 3 months after I started my ag degree was when milk quotas came in. First time that the EU basically turned around and told farmers not to produce as much as they could in about 30, 40 years at that time. What was fascinating was when you looked at that a year on, the time all the farmers complained about it, because they were forced to reduce milk output by 10%. A year on, what most of them recognised was their profits had gone up. Because that last 10% of output was costing them more than that 10% of output was worth to produce. So it's about looking at this from a profit point of view. Using the tech to drive efficiency is the way I think we really set forward. Now, some farmers can do that on their own, some need to do that with a group. One of the things that I referred to groups before, there was a wheat and oilseed rape group came together in South Cambridgeshire about 20 years ago that I was involved in at the time. What was fascinating about that, at the time they were all commercial scale farms. They were 1,000 to 2,000 acre type scale, which 20 years ago was seen as a commercial farm, those types of crops. By coming together, sharing their expertise, sharing their machinery, sharing their labour, they took over, and this is 20 years ago, they took over £50 an acre off their costs. Those are the sorts of things we need to be doing more of, in my view. Actually, to recognise, come together, we can buy the latest tech, we can have the data, we can have the understanding, we can drive some of those types of change. Now that requires some culture change, it requires investment, come together, drive it forward. Even medium and smaller sized farms can get some of those gains. Larger ones potentially can do it on their own, but even they, I find, gain from sharing.
DEF has also put out some reports on kind of the macro fundamentals that affect farm profitability, because it's not just the tech that's going to affect profitability of the farm, right? If the core macros aren't there, then the farm's not going to be profitable. And it compares lots of different farms all over the country and how they're doing things, and the strategies and the techniques will work. So.
And another example of that, and just again at the larger scale, so if you take the business my brothers run, business my cousins run, and the next door farm to us at home, there's about 250 staff. So they're all reasonable scale sorts of businesses, but they share their staff. So they keep the staff busy all year. Therefore, they can have long-term careers. People can have a 12-month-a-year job. But each of the farms also keeps the cost base down because they don't have the staff on the farm and they don't need them. So those three firms do different crops with different labour profiles at different times of the year. By sharing the staff, everybody benefits from that. Those are the sort of things that I think we need to do.
Okay, thanks Martin. Sorry to interrupt, we have run over time, so I'm going to call an end to this breakfast briefing. I just want to thank everyone for coming along. It's great to have kind of voices in the room and have some dialogue. If we could just thank our speakers again, that would be great. Thank you. And please speak to one of the team. You know, we do different events. You know, we're kind of constantly getting information out there about things and updates around what we're doing. So if you want to stay in touch, please get in contact with Tyler, Nicola, one of the team, and we'll follow up with you.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.